Coming up on Nebraska Stories, the newest member of the Nebraska Hall of Fame, a king-size love story from Nashville, teachers who dig geology, and a student pursues the highest honor in 4-H. From co-founding the New School to saving European intellectuals from Nazi persecution, Alvin Saunders Johnson's life is an epic tale of achievement.
The Academy Award-winning film Schindler's List tells the story of a German industrialist who saved hundreds of Jewish workers from the Nazi death camps. As improbable as it seems, a man from Nebraska also saved hundreds of Jewish lives. He grew up near Homer, Nebraska, where in the 1880s he rode his horse to a one-room school. In the 1920s and 30s, he rose to prominence as president of the New School in New York City. He used his influence there to rescue almost 200 European scholars.
If Nebraska needed their own person called Schindler, this is the man who made a similar achievement, and it is nothing short of remarkable.
But it wasn't easy. He had many critics, some from his own university.
People who were saying, "Don't do this, Alvin. I mean, come on. This is not our mission to bring German Jewish intellectuals over here and create something different. That's not how we started out." I believe what he did was the bravest act of any university president in the entire history of American education.
Our hero's name is Alvin Johnson. He is the newest inductee into the Nebraska Hall of Fame. Have you ever heard of Alvin Johnson?
No.
Alvin Johnson, no.
No.
No, I haven't.
No.
I've never heard of Alvin Johnson. Never.
The baseball player, right?
I've not heard of Alvin Johnson.
I'm sorry. I feel an immense sense of guilt at not knowing that.
Alvin Johnson was born on a farm near Homer, Nebraska in Dakota County in 1874.
If you had met him when he was 10 years old on a farm in Homer, Nebraska, you'd be asking him, well, what do you think about farming?
He became kind of scholarly in the eyes of his friends, and being a gangly youth, they gave him the sobriquet of Frogman.
When he was 18 years old, he enrolled at the University of Nebraska, where he was tutored by none other than Willa Cather, who said of one of his freshman compositions, "You write not badly, but you don't see." But Alvin Johnson did have vision. After graduating from Nebraska and getting a PhD from Columbia, he rose to become one of the founders and finally the president of the New School for Social Research in New York City.
Among the things that he carried over into the creation of the New School was the belief that the intellectual activity had to connect to life. You had to get civically engaged.
One of the jobs of the New School president was to recruit some of the best scholars in the world to come to the school and teach.
What Alvin Johnson believed is you got a lot of people out there making decisions, and the quality of their decision-making is going to get better as a consequence of understanding these things. So he believed in bringing these phenomenal people to deliver lectures. And people who were already educated could sit in the audience and say, "Oh my God, I never thought of that before."
All three of us are. Come on, Jerry. You ready? Right. Your phone forward.
Alvin Saunders Johnson, humanitarian, educator, economist, innovator in American adult education, creator of a safe haven for Jewish scholars fleeing Nazism, author of America's first anti-discrimination legislation, elected to the Hall of Fame in 2012. I have seen 3 or 4 of the very few photographs that were ever taken of Dr. Johnson, and it was a challenge for the sculptor to create an image that was a great likeness with very, very scant information. And I think the physical representation of him here is appropriate to his greatness.
I think it's really important in trying to capture the essence of someone is to use the bust and use things in that bust as symbols to represent their accomplishments. I thought his hands were very important. His grandson I was talking to yesterday, he's like, I hung out with Alvin for a summer. He's like, he had the biggest hands, he was a farmer. He worked with his hands and he read and elevated himself and in doing so elevated many others over the history of his life.
Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany in 1933. Within months, every Jewish professor in Germany was fired. By the end of 1933, the first concentration camp was built. It was called Dachau. Soon it was illegal for Jews to hold any government job. With remarkable foresight, Alvin Johnson saw what was coming. At the New School in 1933, he created a graduate school called the University in Exile. It was a way to bring scholars into the United States from Germany. Just how difficult these individual rescues were can be seen in the escape route of Polish scholar Dr. Alexander Turin. Dr. Turin made his way from Poland to the Black Sea, where he took a small boat to Istanbul, then another boat to Smyrna, where he was joined by his wife and son. Together, they proceeded by train to Baghdad, and then flew to Karachi, and finally got to Bombay, where they boarded the ship, the President Roosevelt, and by way of Cape of Good Hope, made it to New York City. In addition to saving lives, Johnson's dramatic rescues brought a new generation of gifted educators to America whose teaching impacted thousands of students. Is that worth being in the Hall of Fame?
Oh, absolutely. And when you look at the talent and the intellectual power that came over to this country as a result of people like that, absolutely worthy of the Nebraska Hall of Fame, and obviously much more than a baseball player.
The professors at the New School created such a dynamic atmosphere, it attracted a 19-year-old student from Omaha named Marlon Brando. Brando said, "I was only there 1 year, but what a year it was." Another student was playwright Tennessee Williams. 3 years later, Tennessee cast Brando in the Broadway premiere of A Streetcar Named Desire. In his autobiography, Alvin Johnson was so modest that Brando and Williams weren't even mentioned. Johnson's low-key manner throughout his lifetime was classically Nebraskan.
He was born and grew up in Nebraska, bachelor's and master's degrees at the university, and the people I've interviewed who talk about him always bring up that he was a farmer at heart. He never lost his Nebraskan-ness.
When Elizabeth King lost her job, she packed her car and moved to Nashville, where she not only met country music legends, but the love of her life.
Young, independent, and emerging from a broken engagement. What Mary Richards portrayed on the popular 70s sitcom, Elizabeth Yax was living in real life.
Here I am, 29, no house, no fiance, no job. What do? Well, you move to Nashville.
Rather than a sitcom, Elizabeth's story could be a classic country song. A spunky, small-town girl grows up in a happy family, graduates college with a degree in sociology and big dreams.
I went into radio, because that's what you do when you have that kind of a degree, I guess. KSYC was the newcomer on the block, and they had a lot of fun things going for them.
Within 4 years, Elizabeth was sales manager, and just when things couldn't get better, the station was sold. Elizabeth Story was in for a big change.
I had just been engaged prior to the radio station selling, and I called off my wedding. So here I am, 29, the station is sold, I've lost my job, but I do have my RX-7. I put everything that fit in that RX-7, which, trust me, wasn't a lot. I took off to Nashville. I think I was a little crazy, but definitely determined, and I didn't have anything.
But thanks to a friend, Elizabeth had a place to stay and a backstage pass to the Grand Ole Opry.
It was a common courtesy thing that they would give you access backstage if you worked in the radio department, with a radio station.
In a way only Elizabeth could do, she turned a single night's access into a 2-year pass.
Yes, well, it's called making friends. So you smile and you make friends, and you belong there. And little by little, I didn't have to show a pass, I didn't have to be on the list.
Elizabeth made a lot of friends, but none more important than the one she made with Terry King.
It was just like wow, what a great smile.
Like a page from a romance novel, Elizabeth and Terry met for the first time backstage at the Grand Ole Opry, where Terry was working as a musician.
I was still with Patty, and we had just gotten back from a USO tour with Randy Travis. And so we were at the Opry.
That was the very night Elizabeth used her backstage pass.
Pretty good night for me, too, because 2 years later I married that Terry King.
Terry grew up 1 hour from Nashville and taught himself how to play guitar. But he didn't get his start in country music.
Ended up in Muscle Shows and was a staff writer there for a while.
Terry wrote songs for top R&B talent, but after a few years, he moved back to Nashville and went to work for top country artists.
Terry got a call, and it was Mel, and he said, "We're going to Branson."
Terry and Elizabeth had been dating over a year when he got the call. It was the early 90s, and while Terry went to Branson, Elizabeth stayed in Nashville.
I said, Mel, this girl that I was dating in Nashville, I think I'm going to ask her to marry me. He said, take me home and you can take my car.
Elizabeth and Terry tied the knot back in Nebraska just a few days before Christmas.
It was 15 below zero with 25 below zero wind chills. They always said it'd be a cold day when I got married. And it was.
Terry continued working for Mel Tillis, but after their first baby arrived, Terry left his music career and the family settled in Nebraska.
Elizabeth's a good salesman. She's very strong, not only personality-wise, faith-wise. Some aspects she's not only saved my life, she saved my soul.
Looking back, do I think I could move to Nashville and do what I did again now at my age? No way. But am I glad I did? Because now I can say there are no regrets.
And here is where the story gets a little sweeter. Elizabeth and Terry still keep in touch with their old friends.
I don't know. You probably would.
How are you?
It's been more than 20 years since their fateful meeting backstage at the Grand Ole Opry, and yet, the Lovebirds are still singing.
Teachers travel back into deep time to expand their understanding of geology and discover what really drives learning.
It's the Earth, right? We study the Earth. It's really hard to study the Earth in the classroom.
Ready, go. These teachers, they're going to be challenged and they're going to feel like they're students in the classroom. We're here at the Platte River. It's really the first stop where people have gotten dirty and wet and getting into the science. What do you see? But they're also meeting each other. They're learning a lot about each other. We're really building up a fundamental set of knowledge about how rivers work. It's a very basic principle of, water moves sediment.
My name is Dylan Pinkman. I teach at Dawes Middle School and I've been teaching for 3 years. I love doing experiments. I want to be able to do that with my classroom. I can share my experiences with them and I can have some credibility when I come into the classroom.
There certainly is that social dynamic. You just got to work through it. Living, camping, sharing the daily adventure out here. So I would say that this is, just from past trips, this is probably your biggest learning day, where you start to perceive how big geology really is. Each rock has a particular set of signatures or fingerprints that tell us something about how the rock was formed.
We are looking at a lot of sand. I could probably use a little more shade. I'd probably try to focus more on the big picture. I didn't know there were quite so many details with regard to sand.
Courthouse rock here. Being out of your comfort zone, it puts them in the position of where their students are.
Well, that makes sense.
I'm a professor and I do my research and I teach about things at a pretty high level, but I was a really poor teacher for quite some time. I changed entirely the way that I teach by the interaction with these teachers and by seeing the power of what motivates these teachers to just keep going. If you were to sketch this or draw it.
I've taught earth science for just 1 year now, and I can really see that what I was teaching was just really seemed a little bit more fragmented. I'm getting this really big picture now.
But how wide should we draw?
How about if we go from edge to edge of that? Geology is huge. These processes are really big and far-reaching. Having that understanding is huge for me at this point.
So this is, we'll call that the holy layer.
Earth isn't the same as it was 1 million years ago, at 10 million years. The Earth is constantly changing. It's kind of an exciting thing to think, the huge scale of the Earth's time.
We're up at 6, we go to bed at 10, 11, 12, depends on how it goes, but we can be in the vans working from 8 o'clock until 7, 8 at night.
Okay, I am sick of you.
I'm always amazed at how much they can continue to go and continue to stay engaged.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
To the trip's greatest Olympic swimmer.
Yeah, let's see if I can not catch my hair on fire, right?
When I prepare for this, I really don't know how it's going to go every day. It depends on what the teachers bring, what questions they bring up. They can then start to follow their own curiosity. Just let it go.
This doesn't look like Nebraska. It's crazy. This whole area would have been filled up to the highest ridge. That's weathering and erosion, what we're learning in class.
Dylan, he's very aware of why he's here. He's here to be able to, bring more of this into the classroom. So I'm really happy he's got that perspective of the kids. Otherwise, it's just for his own enjoyment. That's not what's driving any of these teachers. I mean, it's hard to be out here waking up on the ground every morning. Enduring it for the students, I think, is what's motivating a lot of these teachers.
Oh, thanks so much.
Today is going to be a great day. We'll be taking a boat ride into Alcova Reservoir and up Fremont Canyon. See him right there.
Kiss.
Road Hare.
We're in the Road Hare stage.
Road Hare stage. We'll be going into the bowels of the earth, if you will, back in time. it's all broke here. Pretty awesome. We didn't really go down in the earth, but we went back through time. It's like taking a knife, cutting in the earth, folding it back, and looking, all the way down. Just going into deep time, where it's really hard to fathom. 3 billion years old, 2 billion years, a long time. So I wanted you to try to think about relationships of these rocks as they cooled.
It's trying to get the kids to understand the time frame and how long all of this stuff takes to actually happen. Science is everywhere you go. It doesn't have to be just out of a book, just out of a video.
Just this morning, Dylan said, I'm not going to teach the same way. I realized how lame my presentation of weathering or of erosion was. So he's going to change the way he presents this and pull it into a way that makes the students think.
What math class lets you go out and do this?
I did it myself. If I can do it, you can do it.
And they were able to share with their students and show a picture of them standing next to these rocks. The students automatically will have respect. The teacher will have credibility for having been a geologist. That's huge.
I don't think I've ever learned or done so much in 2 weeks ever in my life.
I've begun to wonder if Dr. Harwood isn't sort of a freak of nature. We're exhausted, and he's the guy cooking the meals and driving the van. I suggested about 100 miles back that we turn around and do it again. I'm ready to go.
You kind of got to let go of your classroom is partly what this is about, and let the students partly drive what is learned, and then they stay fully engaged.
Sheridan Swotek is hoping her innovative 4-H project will put her on track to receive the organization's highest recognition, the Diamond Clover Award.
I pledge my head to clearer thinking, my heart to greater loyalty, my hands to larger service, and my health to better living. For my club, my community, my country, and my world.
All right, thank you. And we have the Nebraska flag for the Nebraska motto. All right, who would like to hold that? All right, we'll review it really quick. It's equality before the law. All right, can we say that all together? All right, equality before the law. All right, good job.
My mother was a local 4-H'er, and then I was kind of a local and state. Now she's gone on to national. Oh, I think she'll be an intergalactic 4-H'er before you know it. She's very motivated and very determined and very willing to do the hard work it takes to get things done.
In the 4-H program, there's something called the Diamond Clover program. You have to do something really monumental in your community. I would have never thought that I'd be doing goats.
My daughter said, I just think it would be so fun. I know other counties have sheep exchanges or other animal exchanges.
Goats are just something that people are probably not most familiar with. He actually was able to donate 6 goats from his family, and so that's how we kind of got started.
One of my goals ultimately was to be able to have some type of project like this where urban kids could show a goat. All kids should be able to raise some type of animal during their life. Most kids can raise a dog or a cat, but they're nothing compared to raising a livestock species.
Okay, no, just leave it out so that when they're ready to get out with...
When you're dealing with livestock, you're dealing with all sorts of different health problems.
Go straight into that muscle, then pull it back to make sure you're not in a vein. Just give him the shot and then rub a little bit.
Getting those animals broke to show, bonding with that animal, and then in the end, ultimately having to sell that animal. So it's a totally different aspect to raising a pet.
They come out every other night or so and work with their goats and really get their goats to know them. Working with our goats is basically just kind of walking them around and practicing setting them up and just, getting your goat to know you. Then by the time of the fair, they're really familiar with their goats and they're ready to show them.
Then if the judge stands right here, all of you guys should be at the front of your goat, so that as that judge looks down the line, all he sees is those animals, so he's comparing them. Perfect. Sheridan, why don't you go ahead and walk her again?
There's kids who are really disconnected from how agriculture affects us. I took them to my work and got to have, 160, K through 5 kids be able to interact with a goat.
So what are some other things you see about Ted?
Some of them, they've never seen a goat before in person. And so just having them come up and see a goat and, feeding a goat and having them have that hands-on interaction is really pretty cool.
So on the Nubians, their ears are big and long, so you can actually notice that they have ears. And then on the La Mancha goats, they have just little earlobes that are about the size of that. At the fair, you take their collar and you put them right up there, and then you just hold them with 2 fingers and just lead them around.
The kids usually don't expect to come to their summer day camp and work with a goat. We've done this a couple of times, and they still are talking about the goat that came like 3 weeks ago.
Let's go, buddy. I know, guys. I know. Come on, Billy. Let's do good today. I have to pull you away from eating it.
What I've seen through my children and my club and other kids interacting with 4-H is they are enthusiastic when they have a chance to learn something new.
4-H really teaches, 4-H teens to be a greater role model in their community and with whoever they work with. I feel like 4-H has made me definitely a better person.
Watch our stories online at netnebraska.org/Nebraska Stories and go to Facebook to like us and leave a comment. Join the Nebraska Stories conversation. Nebraska Stories is funded by the Margaret and Martha Thomas Foundation and the Nebraska Office of Highway Safety. Sustained funding for arts coverage on Nebraska Stories is provided by the H. Lee and Carol Gendler Charitable Fund and the Nebraska Arts Council and Nebraska Cultural Endowment.